So you ever decide to go out and pump up your long run, go a little extra distance, and then you find out later, maybe next week, you're injured? Well, you're not alone, and science now explains why. A recent study out of Denmark says one simple training mistake, one you might be making, can more than double your risk of injury. Hi, I'm Ralph, the Ageless Runner. I'm here to help you train smarter, run longer, and stay ageless. Thank you for being here today. So researchers from Aarhus University studied over 5,200 recreational runners, looked at over 588,000 runs over 18 months. And the goal was to find out what's actually causing injuries. And what did they learn? Well, they learned weekly mileage doesn't matter. Pace doesn't matter, even terrain doesn't matter. What matters is that single long run, the single run where you might spike your distance more than what you've run the past 30 days. They found that the risk of injury grew when you ran a run more than 10% over your longest run in the last 30 days. For example, say your longest run in 30 days was 10 miles. If you ran 11 to 13 miles, your risk of injury went up by 64%. And if you ran more than 13 but up to 20 miles, then it grew by 160%, more than double. And if you ran more than 20 miles, well, then it jumped up to 120% risk of injury. So the message here is that weekly mileage doesn't count, but that spikes in long run do. So this is kind of a game changer. It kind of flips what a lot of training plans are based on. A lot of training plans are based on weekly mileage. How many miles do I get? In fact, most training plans allowing running watches track something called acute chronic workload ratio. It's really the ratio of how your weekly mileage compares to the last 4 weeks. For example, if my last 4 weeks, I've averaged 30 miles a week, but this week I ran 45, that's an acute chronic workload ratio 1.5, which that ratio would say that's dangerous, you're risking injury. But there's one problem with that statistic, that ratio, is that it's based on a study of 28 rugby players. Now, rugby is certainly a very athletic sport, involves running, but it's not long distance running. And of course, our researchers at our house kind of threw that out of the water, saying that really doesn't matter. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm trying to grow my channel, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you very much. So we really shouldn't be too concerned about weekly mileage. We should be concerned about spikes in our distance. As a lead researcher said, and I quote, "We've been looking in the wrong place for years. The true signal was buried in plain sight. Just one bad decision in a single run." So what does this mean for us, for runners training for longevity, especially if you're over 40? Well, first it means we should be monitoring the distance of our longest run the past 30 days, not just our weekly mileage. It also means we should be cautious anytime we go over our previous maximum longest run. And it reinforces what many seasoned runners say, respect the long run. Let's say, for example, your previous long run the last 30 days was 8 miles. It doesn't mean today, because it's cool and low humidity, you go out and run 11 or 12. No, increase it by 5 to 10%, no more than 10%, which means you might go 8.5 to 9. Be very careful. So let's cover a few tips now that we know this very important research data. And tip number 1 is know your 30-day max. Look at your training records on your phone, your watch, however you track it. What's the longest run you've done in the last 30 days? So tip number 2 is build your long run distance slowly. No more than 10% increase, 5 to 10% is ideal. Be sure to space out those long runs. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time to recover. It's poor recovery that increases the risk of injury. If we're tired and not well recovered, that's where we risk our injury. So use tech wisely. You know, our running watches, our running apps on our phones don't really catch these long runs. They don't necessarily give you an alert if you've exceeded that. So be sure to monitor those long runs and keep track of your distance. And finally, track your effort, not just your distance. You know, if it's very hot and humid out, or you're running a hilly terrain, or you're trail running, that's a lot of extra effort. You may want to cut your long run short. Be very careful you don't hurt yourself because you're working too hard. And finally, if you're doing the run, walk, run method like I do, these tips still apply. You still need to be careful with spikes. If you're always doing run, walk, run like I do, and you increase your long run, still doing run, walk, run, you're still risking injury if you exceed that 10%. I love studies like this because it reminds us it's just not the grind that gets us. Sometimes it's that greedy jump, saying I'm going to go that extra mile or extra 2 miles. That is what can burn us in the behind. So remember, consistency beats intensity, and staying healthy, that's how we keep running for decades. So if you want to train smarter, run longer, stay ageless, this is one study if you remember. Be careful of increasing your long runs. Now, if you found this video helpful and you enjoyed it, I would so appreciate you liking and also subscribing. Those subscribes really help my channel. Thank you again for being here, and remember, train smarter, run longer, and stay ageless. Thank you.